Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani back with another edition of Rudy's Common Sense. Today, we're going to take a look at the consequences of our now, for some time, almost since Biden became president, having a completely open border, particularly along the Southwest. And what that means to a country and what the consequences are. There's always an academic debate about whether there should be a closed border or an open border. I don't know that there really is any debate. Not if a closed border means legal, regular entry under a set of sensible rules. So we don't have that. We have an open border. People come in. To a large extent, we know very little about them. And then we allow them and send them all around the United States. We still send a few back under Title 42, which is an emergency provision because of COVID, which the Biden administration has done everything it can to do away with, and the courts have required it to keep, but it enforces it in a much less aggressive way. So here's the simple facts. Last year, we set a record for the most arrests, the most detections made by the Immigration Service. And that number, I have a chart, my usual charts. I have a chart here that will show it to you very easily. You take a look at that. And I wanted to make that point before we move on with anything else, that already, without the fiscal year being over, we have passed the record of last year, which is a record set by President Biden, which is virtually double the worst year that Trump had, and about 5 times the other 3 years under Trump. His worst year was about 700,000. We're now pushing, or 800. We're now pushing 2 million. His better years were below 500,000, including his last year, when he finally worked out the Mexico situation. And if you look at it historically, I mean, this is much worse than Obama. It's much worse than Bush. Bush's worst years were worse than Trump, but still less than Biden. With 2 million people coming in for a total of maybe 4 or 5 million under Biden, how can you say we have nothing other than an open border? And then please remember, for the numbers that we know about, there's always a number we don't know about. And that's calculated anywhere from 50 to 100%. In other words, if you have 5 million, you've got 2.5 million minimum who we never got to see, never got to talk to. But the real question here is, what are the consequences of that? How did it happen? What are the consequences? And I have with me a person who is an expert on these illegal drugs. She was the head of a hospital that she reformed and changed and fixed, and is one of the best known CEOs of rural hospitals. She was voted the best one for 8 years in a row. But as you might find somewhat surprising if you're enough in that neck of the woods, New Hampshire has been for some time a real haven for all kinds of different forms of illegal drugs. And of course, she faced that as head of the hospital and in her other work in New Hampshire. And she's become quite an expert on fentanyl now. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Maria, who is my partner on Uncovering the Truth, which we do, just in case, every Sunday. When do we do it on Sunday, Maria?
Uncovering the Truth is 10 a.m. every Sunday, and it streams worldwide at wabcradio.com. And so I am a board certified nurse practitioner. And for those people who don't know what that is, it means I'm licensed to practice independently. It is very different than a nurse. It's like a doctor. And in several states, including mine, New Hampshire, you don't have to practice with a doctor. You could have your own practice. You could have your own clinic as a nurse practitioner. So sometimes I don't know why I'm so interested in this border situation.
But also you were, as I pointed out,
A hospital CEO.
Your PhD
Oh, yes.
is in hospital administration, not just your academic PhD, but your work PhD.
Yes.
Which I always think is more important
Yes.
than an academic PhD. I mean, you're really, the last decade, you really have been a hospital administrator under a lot of pressure with a hospital that was a failing hospital. You turned
That
around.
is true.
Don't be too modest. And you were voted the best rural CEO 8 years in a row.
Yeah, something like that. I've been blessed to have been acknowledged repeatedly in my field as an expert, including
Because you're very good at it. So
the Louis Gordon Lifetime Achievement Award I also received. But the border.
yeah,
So
and the
you
reason-
know.
So tell us about New Hampshire for a second, because this will explain why you know so much about this. I mean, I've known about this since I ran for president and spent time up in New Hampshire. Shocked as hell when I got there in 05, 06, 07. They had a drug problem in New Hampshire. And I was the head of the narcotics section in Manhattan, in New York, the heroin capital of the world. I thought I knew everything about it. And here I go to New Hampshire and we're faced with a massive drug problem.
Yeah, and it really peaked around 2015, and it was shocking. And we had so many deaths due to opioids. And it came a point that my healthcare field made a mistake. I don't think it was understood how addictive opioids were. And what we did was the fifth vital sign was considered asking a patient their pain rating from 0 to 10. And we were all schooled in that. And to treat the pain. It was inhumane not to treat the pain. So a lot of providers were very free with writing prescriptions. So we, the healthcare industry, addicted a lot of people. So as more and more research came out.
You addicted them really in good faith.
Yes.
Because the advice was take care of their pain.
Yes.
And they were in pain.
Yes.
But you're saying there might have been alternatives that could have been used, and you didn't have to move toward a addictive drug as quickly as sometimes they did.
Correct.
But it wasn't done like a drug dealer does it,
right,
for massive illegal profit.
Right.
It was done out of the best science at the time.
Absolutely. And so once more and more research came out and recognized that these pills are very addictive and we should be going for different ways of treating pain, doctors and nurse practitioners started to prescribe less. Well, unbeknownst to a lot of people, they were addicted and they craved the drug. So they started going to the street. If they couldn't get initially,
I remember this. Very
yes,
how a good motivation
mm-hmm.
causes an unforeseeable problem.
Right. And that happens all the time in our history, whether it's healthcare or not.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what happened. And at one point, when the providers stopped prescribing the medications so much, people went to the streets to find their opioids. There were a lot of overdoses. Everybody cracked down on it. So what's the next best thing to get a high? Heroin. At that time, and that's how heroin, it was very cheap, very accessible, believe it or not, in New Hampshire. And looking recently at an unclassified DEA document from 2015, I was so shocked to find out the Sinaloa cartel was in Manchester, New Hampshire.
Oh my goodness. Well, we're going to talk about that, and we have on prior broadcasts. Again, I have a map for it. And because I really believe the American people have to be educated about this. Because if I had to be educated about it, who probably back in the 70s and 80s knew more about drugs than just about anyone, as the chief prosecutor in the drug capital of America, my early specialty was I was chief of the narcotics division in the U.S. Attorney's Office. But I was So I always thought of the Mexican groups as fairly small groups helping the Colombians. The Colombians were the big deal. They were the cartels, the mafia, the French connection, the Canadian connection. Now we come to this era, and for the last 15, 20 years, the Mexican cartels have become just as sophisticated, just as big, just as rich, maybe richer than the mafia or the Colombian cartels. These are very, very professional, deadly criminals.
Absolutely. They're trained like the military, very different cartels, very violent.
Very different than 30 years ago. This is not Pancho Villa,
Right.
These are scientific, smart, brilliant, multi-millionaires and billionaires.
Well equipped with the latest in weaponry. And we, again, I have to say we, because I'm an American citizen and it is my government. My government has made these cartels billionaires because of what is happening at the border.
May I say, just to correct that for a moment?
Mm-hmm.
Joe Biden made them millionaires. Trump went after them. If you can't recognize a problem, you can't solve a problem. If they really, let's assume for a moment, they really are walking around believing there's not an open border, we have no hope.
And you would think, say they were that naive, that there's enough people talking about it, there's enough senators who have visited the border that they would themselves go and see what is happening and go and interview those border patrol, which, by the way, they are heroes for putting up with what they have to do every day.
Well, they're tortured by the Biden administration. Yeah. They're absolutely tortured. Look at those guys they were claimed to have whips. They didn't have whips.
Yeah.
You watch them on television. They're crying for help.
And they're put in very dangerous situations all the time.
Yeah, they're put in very dangerous situations. And so if we want to begin now with the why this happened, I read an article in the Wall Street Journal that somehow tries to blame it on Trump. It's really about the most tortured, intellectually dishonest article I've ever read. If you look at Trump's numbers, Trump's worst year is half what Biden is doing. If you look at his 3 best years, they were under control. Mm. And when the numbers shot up, he didn't just sit there and do nothing. He went and negotiated the Mexico return agreement and this was a brilliant thing that he did. And I'm going to tell you, he borrowed it from Ronald Reagan because I was involved in doing it with Ronald Reagan. He did the screening for refugees in Mexico rather than in the U.S. And the reason he did that is that's the heart of the people getting absorbed in the United States and never leaving. Mm. They come in. The minute you claim you're a refugee, you have to be given a hearing. Doesn't matter how stupid your claim is, how dumb your claim is. So one of the things that the cartels teach them to say coming over the border, say you're a refugee. Now you say you're a refugee, you have to have a hearing. Once you have to have a hearing, they've got, 200,000 lined up. They put you on for 2 years from now or a year from now. And then they parole you. And long before Governor Abbott got himself involved in what I think is a brilliant strategy of showing that these sanctuary cities are a bunch of hypocrites, complete hypocrites, basically they would just let out. And Biden would then ship them all over America. Biden was doing 50 times the shipping that Abbott is doing. I remember, and you remember, we did a piece on the getting caught at Westchester County Airport.
That's right. The Biden administration, in the middle of the night, under the secrecy of dark, would fly on taxpayers' dollars illegal aliens into Westchester, New York.
And before that, Newark.
Yes, I do feel obligated to say, like we do on our radio show, we love immigrants. It's what our country was founded on. It's what makes us so unique is all the different nationalities. But there has to be a process and there has to be following the law. We are supposed to be a country made up of laws. And that's what we're asking for.
They all remember the following from Joseph Biden. They remember it as if it was yesterday.
I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come.
So now you've taken a look at that also, surge to the border. It's a heck of a word to use. Even if you're going to invite them to the border, it has to come in an orderly way. His invitation to surge to the border went internationally viral. And if you interview 10 of the people that have come in illegally, 7 or 8 of them have mentioned Biden. This is his invasion. Mm. This is not other illegal immigration situations that had to be dealt with by Carter or Reagan or Clinton or Bush or even Trump were caused by other things. This is caused by his asking him to come. Basically, he's saying, if you get in and you say you're a refugee, you're going to be kept here. We're not going to send you back. We're going to keep you here. You're going to get a hearing. And then you soon find out that takes 2 or 3 years. And this is, you couldn't have done better if you did like a travel advertisement and said, come to the United States illegally, surge to the border, come in. And no, if you don't have, and then as he says very clearly, if you are here illegally and don't have any documents, we're not going to send you back. If you come in and you are here without documents, we are not going to send you back. That created the disaster we're living in right now, because that was heard by everyone who wants to come here. And they found out they could come here without consequences, and they're coming. I don't know where a president comes off saying that. He's supposed to enforce the law. So that really makes it very, very clear that if you come into the United States and you don't have papers, which is illegal, and of course, irrational. If you don't have papers, we don't know who you are. You could be the nicest person or you could be a serial killer. But we're going to keep you. Now, why wouldn't people then, since this was made at the time that he made his comment to surge to the border, basically you put those two things together and anybody who wants to come here is being told, come here. So now the consequence of that is, doctor, that we have people coming in during that period of time, and we had COVID. Now, how is it that these people were not checked for COVID?
Well, that doesn't make any logical sense, right? It was very illogical. People were fighting the mandates because most of the mandates did not make sense. They did not follow the science. And we now know that very much, that the mandates were all wrong. The mask mandates, the vaccine mandates, the lockdown mandates. But at the time when the Biden administration was saying, oh my God, pushing vaccines, pushing mandates, they were literally allowing thousands upon thousands of people to come in unchecked. But American citizens, they were saying, had to be vaccinated or had to have a test before they moved from one place to another, or had to wear a mask, or they couldn't go to church. So it didn't make any logical sense. And this is what is making people then and now angry. The administration needs to come forward, almost like you and I. We were both leaders in different industries. You were leader over a city and I was leader over hospitals. When there's a mistake, whether it's clinically, financially, or whatever, you got to be transparent and bring it out to your staff and say, okay, here's where we went wrong, and this is what we're going to do better the next time. And we do that in emergencies all the time. You have a busload of people got in an accident and it was very chaotic, and okay, how can we do things better? And you move forward. They have to do that. They have to come forward and say, we were wrong about the mask mandates. Here's why. Here's the research to it. We were wrong about these vaccines. And we've seen that through time. They're not 90% effective. They last for 3 to 6 months, and they're not a vaccine, and people aren't getting informed consent, blah, blah, blah.
Well, that really speaks to the fact that the administration in almost all areas is not transparent.
Right.
And that it holds information back and it lies.
Well, this is the border situation that really
Well,
upsets
let's just talk
me.
about the border situation, because I don't know. I mean, the lying is pretty uniform, but pretty darn dramatic, because we see it with our own eyes. I mean, last year we had that tremendous number of people that basically became a city in Texas, and they were denying it, and you could see it on television.
Yes.
Every night. You see people coming over. One of the consequences that rarely is mentioned, I agree that fentanyl and drugs probably is one of the primary ones, are all the people that die coming over. I mean, he doesn't bother explaining to them the way a pharmaceutical commercial explains the downsides of the medicine. He doesn't explain to them, well, please take into consideration also that some significant percentage of people die coming over.
Not only is the territory treacherous to navigate, the heat, the water, people drown. It's what happens on that journey. We all know we don't control our border. We are no longer a sovereign unity. We are no longer a sovereign country. The cartel says who comes in, who doesn't. They pay money to those cartels, and they are well known for raping women and children en route. There are even trees called rape trees that they'll put an article of clothing up on a tree to tell anybody who passes by, we're in control. Do not try to fight us. Do not try to escape us. If you didn't pay your full fee, we know where you are. We're going to find you. We're holding one of your relatives, whether in your country of origin or because there are cartel members in every state of the union, their eyes are on you.
That was a surprise for you, wasn't it?
It was, because of my beloved Manchester, New Hampshire. And I was surprised how many cartel in the Northeast. It just surprises me how they are positioned in our country.
Let me show you, Doctor, and our audience. They've said, some of them have seen this before, but this is the complexity of what goes on in Mexico. These are the routes. I know they're all very helter-skelter, and that's really all you have to get out of it. They start way down in the south of Mexico, and they come out of countries like Honduras and Guatemala, and you can see they have all different ways of getting to the north of Mexico by land, by sea. In cases of big time illegal immigrants like terrorists or multimillionaires who are paying for this, they'll go by plane. They have many different ways of doing it. They've got a sea route that goes through the Panama Canal from Colombia, or you can come by land from Colombia, which is very, very dangerous, by the way. And then they have border points. Juarez is one of the right across. Juarez is a sister city with El Paso. You can walk between Juarez and El Paso. You've got about 8 or 10 places in Texas where they come over. But the amazing thing that you were shocked about, this you can just see you can just see it.
Yeah.
That's where they are in the United States.
Yeah.
Those activities can mean fentanyl and drugs, which is their big number.
Mm-hmm.
It could mean trafficking in women. It can mean trafficking in children.
Mm-hmm.
And it can mean working with ISIS.
And other crimes, right? Because there's a price to come into the United States that is what the cartel says that price is. You could be in servitude for the rest of your life. You may think, I paid my $6,000 to $10,000 to the cartel. That's it. They're going to wipe their hands of me. They may say, you know what? You have a nice teenage son there. They're going to become part of the cartel, part of one of our gangs. And for the rest of their life, they're going to commit crimes. Absolutely. And kick 100%. Up money to us. And
if you don't have money, they want one of your kids. Yep. if the girl is pretty, they want the girl.
But
If
it's
the kid
terrible.
is of the right age, they want the kid. That's going to be your payment. You got to give up one or two of your kids. This actually happens. And the single biggest recruiter for this effort by the cartels, of which there are, well, they list here about 8 or 10. But there are really 8 really major ones. Sinaloa is the one you were talking about. It's the oldest one. It's hard to say which is the most dangerous. Los Zetas is very, very dangerous. The Gulf Cartel is growing in a very, very big cartel. The Knights Templar, Independent Cartel of Acapulco, Cartel Pacifico over by the Baja, California. They pretty much divide up the border. They're the gatekeepers of the border.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get past them.
No.
And they exact something from it. They can take $25,000 a person, $10,000 a person, $2,000 a person. They can take a person.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They can make you put terrorists in with them
Yes.
to hide them. They can make you put in gang members to hide them. And they are definitely going to get you to bring in fentanyl and other forms of drugs. That for sure.
Now, the fentanyl seizures are up. So one may think, oh, that's great. They're really stopping it coming in the United States because every day we hear about a new seizure. When in fact, the Border Patrol are saying because there's so much coming in, that means they're pushing it in other areas. Because we're catching a bigger amount, that means bigger amounts are coming into the United States.
Yeah, I mean, that's again an exercise in common sense and rationality that seems to not affect the Biden administration. And when I say the people, around and for Biden, I'm not doing what Biden's doing. I'm not attacking Democrats. The Democrats are intelligent. They're smart. They're just as smart, just as intelligent, just as honest, and just as good as Republicans. Unfortunately, they have a leadership of their party that's rotting from the head down. This is a form of corruption. I mean, Joe Biden, if he had the mental capacity to do this, somehow would have to go to bed at night trying to justify why he's the biggest recruiter for the Mexican cartels. Nothing ever happened to the Mexican cartels that was as good as Joe Biden.
Yeah.
The day you got on television and said surge to the border, he became the hero.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the dumbest, craziest, most dangerous thing you could ever do. So it leads to death for immigrants without warning, as it did when I was dealing with it during the Haitian and Cuban situation, but even more deaths now. It leads to terrible things happening at the border as a result of the extortion by the cartels, rape, abduction of children, involuntary
trade.
servitude, sex trade,
labor trade,
use of these people as mules, drug carriers, use of these people to bring in guns.
Sure.
Gun trafficking, big time.
Yep.
Use them to bring in material for terrorists.
Yeah.
It's been at least a 15-year alliance between Sinaloa and ISIS.
You and I have talked about this on Uncovering the Truth, that we're really scared there's going to be a terrorist attack on our soil.
Much easier now than
much
it would have
easier.
Would have been then, even with the increased enforcement that we have at the airports. Well, that's fine. That's one way of coming in. We have no enforcement at the southern border, none. And then when the people come in, with very little investigation, we just send them all over the United States. I mean, they're not going to tell us if they're murderers. They're not going to tell us if they're sexual deviants.
Yeah.
So that's some of the consequences. But let's consider a few of the others, and we will after we take a short break. Not long ago, Mike Lindell, the inventor of MyPillow, and his team fit me for my very own MyPillow. They also introduced me to their wide assortment of other incredible products, like their mattress topper, their sheets, towels, slippers, and more. Sleep is incredibly important to me, and I can assume for all of you. It's time you give MyPillow a try and see for yourself. Listeners have helped build MyPillow into the incredible company it is today, And Mike Lindell wants to give back to all of you. You can get great discounts on MyPillow products by going to mypillow.com right now and seeing each of the specially priced items, including those in the radio listener special square. You're going to see rotational offers up to 66% off on products like their pillows, mattress topper, Giza sheets, but also new products like their slippers, weighted blankets, robes, and waffle blankets. All MyPillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Enter promo code Rudy for these great specials. That's mypillow.com and use the promo code Rudy. Thank you for returning to our discussion of the consequences of an open border, which I think we have pretty much established beyond any doubt exists, and that the Biden administration, the best thing you can say for them is they're in a state of denial. Abbott, and now to some extent Ducey, are sending illegals who are paroled, who are never going to show up. They're sending them to New York and to Washington that have often boasted about being sanctuary cities. Mm-hmm. In New York, people don't know this, in New York, the city council voted to give illegals the right to vote.
Mm. Is that unconstitutional?
Well, I believe it is under the New York Constitution, but it hasn't been declared unconstitutional.
The people who are traveling, it is my understanding they sign a waiver. They want to go to New York. They want to go to Chicago. They want to go to Washington. Even better sometimes than our own citizens.
Of course they get treated better than our own citizens. First of all, in New York now, Adams and in Chicago, Lightfoot, they're complaining that it's ruining their social service system. Well, that's one of the consequences of illegal immigration. Mm. You're going to ruin social services for Americans. Mm. They've been taking jobs from Americans for years. Yeah. Poor Americans. But now they're finally complaining. A year ago, they were saying, bring them here. Now they're coming, and it's increasing homeless in New York substantially. Second, what about the schools? The schools are overcrowded to start with. The schools are failing before we even get the illegal immigrant. This year was the first massive decline in math in some time. Mm. I mean, we're getting to be, at best, middle-of-the-road country in education. Now we add 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million children who don't know the language, who come from who knows where, with diseases that we don't know about. The school system's falling apart now. Hmm. What does Biden want? Is this on purpose? Is this on purpose to ruin America? What do you think, Doctor? You think this is on purpose? I mean, if you wanted to ruin America, bring in 5 million people so far, plus another 3 million we don't know about. We don't know who they are. There's a good chance some portion of them are criminals, drug dealers, and terrorists. Many of them have nothing, and that's why we got Adams and Lightfoot yelling and screaming about social services. They've seen nothing yet.
I'm perplexed with why this is happening. But in some ways, I see it as chaos, right? Chaos with China producing the ingredients for fentanyl and other drugs that are very harmful and very potent, working with the cartels to bring it into the United States. All of this is creating chaos. Soros-funded DAs who do not follow the law, but put criminals on the street. All this chaos is dividing Americans, which leads to putting a communist agenda in place.
Yeah, so I'm looking at you and I'm saying, if we said this to each other, if I said this to you or you said that to me 5 years ago, you would have thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
And I thought you were crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, I heard people talk about communists, and I being quite a bit older than you, and having studied communism in great detail in college, because it was the thing, it was the 50s and 60s, our threat was communism. Mm. I would have thought, well, this must be like a Senator McCarthy. But I now have come to the conclusion that it's absolutely, this all can't be by accident. You don't just accidentally ruin the United States.
It's by design.
Yeah, you don't accidentally. What sane person would let 4 or 5 million people in during COVID and not wonder if they had COVID, or not wonder if they have a criminal background, or not wonder when you see the numbers when you see people dying in record numbers, it breaks your heart. Tell us just a little bit more before we finish. But before that, there is some good news, isn't there? There is something people can do. Patriot Mobile.
Ah, yes.
You and I love Patriot Mobile, and I'd like you to, I talk about Patriot Mobile all the time on my show because it's the only Christian conservative mobile phone app. Well, that's fine, but they give a lot of the money to causes like building respect for human life, building respect for our ability to defend ourselves under the Second Amendment, preserving our freedom of religion, developing a sane immigration policy. It's wonderful to do something you need to do and do something good at the same time.
Yeah, I love creative people, and I want to buy myself more American products. And when I look at the people at Patriot Mobile and that giving back to good causes for law-abiding American citizens, I'm all in. And they make the plans, the mobile plans, affordable.
At a time in which we all need it, don't we? Inflation affects all of us.
Yeah. And I think they even save a little bit if they use code name Rudy, don't they?
I'm glad you said that. I get a little embarrassed sometimes when I say that. So here's how you do it. You go to patriotmobile.com/Rudy. patriotmobile.com/Rudy. You say it. You're a lot prettier. They're going to listen to you.
patriotmobile/Rudy for savings.
Right.
I think that's great.
Or you can do 972 Patriot. And, here's the thing. You're going to get the same service you get from all those people, many of whom participate in the censoring. And you're going to get the same service, exactly. But you're going to be helping the causes that you hold dear to your heart. And, we're at the point where the things that are going to save our way of life. I mean, I think I should reemphasize something you said, Doctor, because when I was the mayor of New York, there was no bigger supporter of immigration than me. I have a great love of New York and a fair knowledge of its history, and there would be no New York without immigration. This great city wouldn't exist as the most unique city in the world if it were not for immigrants, nor this country, really.
Besides Italy, best Italian food is in New York City.
If you look at the accomplishments of this country, and there are many reasons, including, I believe, the hand of God. But immigration is one of the main reasons. But this is not, please don't confuse this with immigration. Immigration is about people coming here with even a greater desire to succeed than we have. And they energize us. When I became mayor of New York and my city was on its last legs, I used to say I want more immigrants because they're bringing us what we lack. First of all, they usually, I hate to say this, very often they love America more.
They appreciate this country. How many times do we hear these beautiful stories, how they came with nothing and they worked hard. They took 2 or 3 jobs and then they opened their own restaurant and it was successful, or they did something else in the business world, or they became a nurse or a lawyer and they became great success in this country. This is what we're all about.
Yeah, this is what we're all about. And it begins with a respect for the country you're going to. To come in illegally with the help of criminals, even if you're coming for the right reason, begins to deteriorate that respect. It begins to move you into an orbit of people who are going to push you very, very hard to commit very serious criminal acts. It's very, very different than also the era of assimilation. America was the country that assimilated greater than any country in the world. One of the reasons Europe has always had trouble with immigration is you go from Eastern Europe to England, they don't make you an Englishman or an Englishwoman.
Right.
They keep you that way.
Yeah.
You come from Poland or Italy or Germany or France or I don't care where, Africa. You come from Nigeria. You come from. We make you into an American.
Yeah, you still have respect for your nationality, but you come here and you become an American.
I used to say about New York that it's the it's the center of the world. Because if you were sitting up on the moon and you were looking down with the moon person, and the moon person said, "Where's the center of that place? Does that little thing there have a center?" Because we're very little. You'd say, "Yeah, it does." Times Square.
Yeah.
More people speaking more languages from more different parts of the world come together at that place than any other place in the world. Now, the United Nations being here is one reason for that, but every nation's represented here.
Yeah.
So we start off with that. But that's the greatness of New York. People coming in illegally in ridiculously large numbers with no particular love of America, which is what drove immigrants.
Mm.
And with the movement we have to destroy America anyway, internally, this is much more dangerous than people realize. Mm-hmm. And in this election coming up, 2022, you go out and you vote for people who are in favor of strict immigration laws.
Right.
Not people against immigration. People who are in favor of legal immigration
systematic,
that is enforced,
organized way to enter our country, and enough time to be able to vet people. Right now, when people come across that border, we could see if they've ever committed, if they were in our country before, and if they ever committed crimes, and then sometimes they are deported. But if they committed crimes, say they're from China or Venezuela, wherever they're from, we don't really know what crimes or whether they're wanted in those countries. So we need time to do that. And that's why we should have caps on how many come in at any given point so we can do our job correctly.
And the tragedy of it is, in earlier days when we talked about illegal immigration, and I go back to the debates in the Reagan administration and the Simpson-Mazzoli bill, which ended up being a failure, according to former President Reagan, because he felt that he was double-crossed. He allowed for about 4 or 5 million people to be regularized as citizens in return for stricter border enforcement. But they did the regularizing first, and the Democrats double-crossed him. And before he became ill and didn't have real appreciation, he several times expressed that may have been one of his mistakes because he was too naive. Imagine him saying that.
Yeah.
Too naive. The guy who took Gorbachev just passed away, and even though Gorbachev is a mixed figure, I have very fond memories of Trump just taking his pants off when he walked out of Reykjavik and then got everything he wanted. But like Trump, people saw Reagan as he was a very kind man, and Trump wanted to solve this problem. I know that personally. I was his lawyer at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He would have solved this problem for the children. But he found out and he figured out that Schumer and Pelosi, they don't give a damn for the children.
No.
It was a subterfuge to bring in 4 or 5 million people. And then in New York, they demonstrated why they wanted to do it. They gave them the right to vote. How do non-citizens vote? They have no stake in the country.
No. And you so rightly
It won't be a country.
Pointed out this invasion at the border sponsored by people, the Democrat Party, Soros, and the consequences of that: human trafficking, sex trade, servitude to the cartels for the rest of their life. And if I may be so bold, talk about the drugs. So everybody's heard the name fentanyl. There's actually a legal use.
You did some very good interviews about this. Please explain this as we conclude for the benefit of our audience, of my audience and your audience.
So people may have heard about fentanyl. We use it in the hospital. We use it for cancer patients. We use it for pain control after surgery. But there is a illegal synthetic fentanyl coming out of China, some out of India. They work with their cartels, and they bring that in just as it is as fentanyl. But here's the other scary one. They make, and I mean China and India, fake Percocet pills or oxycodone. So say you had a surgery and you get it in the United States by prescription from your doctor. That is compounded in a legitimate pharmacy with controls. These fake Percocet or oxycodone or Xanax or any number of drugs, they look just like the legitimate pills, but they're not. They're synthetic, and they're putting this fentanyl poisoning in it. So a young person may say, oh, I have exams coming up. I'm wicked stressed. And somebody on social media may say, you know what? Hey, this only costs $5 or $10. Why don't you buy this Xanax from me? I got it from my mom. You know, she was a little anxious. They think they're buying the real thing, but it's a synthetic Xanax with fentanyl, and they never wake up again. One pill can kill. So you love your maps. I'm starting to like my little chart here. Fentanyl, the synthetic one, is 50 times stronger than heroin. Right? Heroin kills.
As
50 times. That's dramatic, isn't it?
This all began with me, with heroin being the big bugaboo.
Yep.
And that was the cases that we made the priorities and we prosecuted. If anybody wants to go back and watch the French Connection.
In fentanyl, also 50 times stronger than heroin, 100 times stronger than morphine. As a provider, whenever I prescribe any of these medications, say somebody came into an emergency department with kidney stones and I have the nurse give morphine IV, that nurse knows that they have to watch the respiratory rate. So can you imagine a drug even stronger than that? Well, guess what? So now we have the synthetic fentanyl being put in everything.
This is a tremendous benefit to China. Making a fortune on this.
They're making a fortune, and they're killing us. Now, just to let people know, if you know somebody has taken any kind of opioid in any drug and they're having respiratory difficulty, Narcan can reverse these drugs. It's pretty readily available now, Narcan. The problem is the dosage. So especially with the nitazines, you're going to need like double to triple the doses of Narcan.
Where do you get Narcan?
You can get it from a pharmacy. You can get it by prescription. But in several urban cities now, they have free vending machines for Narcan. But this is a bad message to me, too. Obviously, I want to save lives. But this is what was happening in New Hampshire with heroin. So Narcan can also reverse heroin. So it's almost like a designated driver. You would have, say, a little heroin party, and one person would say, I'm not going to take any heroin tonight. And they would hold the amount of Narcan, comes in a syringe. And the minute someone started to die or stop breathing, they would give the Narcan. So it's a bad message too. Obviously, I want to save lives, but to say, oh, okay, if you overdose, we'll give you Narcan and save your life. It's saying that the drugs are okay.
This is very, very hard. I think if I'm having a little difficulty absorbing this, and I've been through thousands and thousands of drug cases, drug deaths, drug rehabilitation. Wow.
So I know a Chinese whistleblower who had to leave Hong Kong during the pandemic because she identified that it was the CCP virus did come from that Wuhan lab.
People who gave her the courage to testify, Doctor.
She believes it was a bioweapon. I always thought it was a lab leak, but I leave it to her. She knows a lot better. She also believes these kind of drugs is on purpose too. It's to poison us, to cause deaths, to cause chaos. Because remember what President Xi said from China, that he wants to dominate the United States by 2048. And he's on his way.
He's ahead of schedule.
Because we have to unite as a people.
We gave him a gift. We gave him Biden.
Yep.
Now, this is a terrible question to ask you at the end of the interview, but I'm going to ask you anyway because you've got tremendous courage. how can you I'm not going to say you can definitely say this, but how can you discount the possibility that Biden is doing this because China gave him in excess, and his family, of $31 million?
I'm not shy to talk about this.
How can you discount that as a possibility?
I have said it repeatedly on our radio show that I never thought President Biden could become president because I felt he was compromised by the Chinese Communist Party, and I didn't think he could get a clearance. So, even the amount of money, and I don't want to lose topic, but the amount of money that's going to Ukraine right now seems almost ridiculous, over $40 billion. It almost seems like to keep people quiet in that government.
So Ukraine is being invaded, right?
Yes.
And we're spending $41 million more, $41
billion.
What about this invasion?
Invasion
of the United States of America.
Yeah.
Aren't we being invaded?
We need a moratorium on that border. And I am willing. I put myself out there repeatedly. I don't care what party anybody is in. I will help my country, and I will help Kamala Harris, and I will help Joe Biden.
Well, you're not going to help them because
they don't want my help.
But this is getting to be, I'm not going to say completely bipartisan issue, but you see Democrats like Cisneros, and there are Democrats who are on our side here. But in any event, this is something, this is an emergency. This is not something we have time to deal with. We're losing lives every day.
Yeah.
And we're losing our soul of America. They're trying to, China wants to take away America.
Yeah.
Not just as a physical thing. Well, thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome.
Once again,
love the Common Sense podcast.
Yeah. Well, you're a big. I mean, she produces most of the podcasts. You should know. So.